Hello and welcome to all our friends and partners who have joined us for this webinar. I thank you very much. I would like to just quickly open up by introducing myself. My name is Jeremy Weiss, and I joined the American Israel Friendship League just several weeks ago as vice president. I was born in the United States and I live in Israel with my family. Together with me here in Israel, Tel Aviv, just on the seaside, is Dr. David Milch, a dear friend and partner of the AIFL and a member of the board and executive committee. He is a very dear and close friend of Israel. Dr. Milch lives in the United States in New York, and he has been in Israel for the past 10 days on business and personal trip. Following the debriefing from the IDF spokesman, we will ask David to share with us his perspective and experience during these past days of Operation Breaking Dawn. We also have the honor of the presence of the AIFL Israeli Executive Director, Ruby Shamir. Before I introduce the IDF's international spokesman, I would like to share with you some perspectives of reality here in Israel. Like the majority of Israelis, I served in the IDF as part of our duty and privilege. As a son of a Holocaust refugee and my commitment to our people and nation, I served in senior commanding and positions in the IDF and intelligence agency for over 2 decades. I'm a father of 3, and like many, my kids served in the IDF. My daughter, 19 years of age, joined the IDF just over a year ago. She volunteered to serve in a combat unit called Search and Rescue, the same unit that Lieutenant Colonel Hecht, spokesman, served in the past as battalion commander. This is a unit that men and women serve together in full equality. It is a long and difficult training, very difficult. She is now a squadron commander. After several weeks away from home, she came back this past Thursday. She took a shower and immediately was called back down south to the border of the Gaza as part of the operation. We live in the center of Israel. It takes around an hour and a half to get to the border of Gaza. I drove her there. This is the reality of Israel and of Israelis, fathers driving their children to serve in the IDF to their points as part of the operation. When we arrived, I saw her squadron, men and women with uniform and gear from all parts of Israeli society, Jews, Muslim Jews, Christians, Ethiopians, immigrants from Eastern Europe, religious and non-religious, from all social economic backgrounds, sexual identities and political opinions, all joined together to serve. This is our reality. I would like now to introduce you all to Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hecht. Richard Hecht is the IDF international spokesman. He served in a range of positions in his service in the IDF, including, as I mentioned earlier, battalion commander, the Search and Rescue Unit. Operation Breaking Dawn began on Friday, August 5th, and ended on Sunday night, August 7th, a military operation against the Islamic Jihad in Gaza. We have a unique opportunity to hear the IDF spokesman, Lieutenant Colonel Hecht, on this operation. Please.
Jeremy, thank you, and a lot of respect to your daughter's service. I have a daughter who will be joining too very soon. So I just want to say to everybody, don't be worried about my weird accent. I'm a native-born Glaswegian. There was Jews that left Eastern Europe about 100 years ago buying very cheap tickets to Brooklyn, and they got dropped off in the middle, and that's a true story, arriving in Glasgow. So that's the funny accent. So I'll try and work on my diction, and I'll try not go too strong on the Scottish accent. But it's a pleasure to see you all. I have been 25 years in the military. I had a little pause for 2 years recently in corporate world, and being a tormented diaspora Jew, I got called back to service to do this job. I started the job, by the way, 3 days before this event. So it's been I'm a bit overwhelmed still. Also, beyond being a battalion commander in Judea and Samaria, I was also an air defense battalion commander and also a ground unit, as Jeremy talked about. And I did a lot of work with the American military. I was head of the American desk in our general staff. I worked a lot with the American military. I did a lot of ballistic missile defense planning. I was part of the John Allen peace talks that we tried to do during the Obama administration. And I also did all the foreign policy for the Israeli Air Force. Retired, did some corporate work, felt like Willie Loman, and I came back to work for the country. That's who I am.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm assuming that everybody here knows the news. And I'm going to give you all, in the end, when we do these activities, I'm going to give this group missions, because that's, because in the end, I can give you a sort of juicy brief, but I want to share with you the narratives, because in the end, when we're dealing with a conflict in Israel, there's things that are going on within Israel. You know that most Tzabarim Israelis are mainly focused on beating the drums once we start. And then there's a different reality in the outside world, which is a different meal altogether. And that's where we need your help. So I'm going to go very quickly. Jeremy, how long do I have to talk?
Well, we understood that you have 30 minutes. We would like to leave a couple of minutes for questions and answers. But if you can give us a couple of minutes more, we would really appreciate that.
Sure. So what I'm going to try and do is going to tell you the story very, very quickly. And then I'm going to focus on what we did here in the narrative battle that we were fighting here for legitimacy. Just to put it into context very, very quickly, and I'm sure you know most of this. The first picture that I have in my brain, and I'm starting from that picture, which I don't know if you all remember, is a guy wearing a white suit with a Punisher emblem on his back, spraying a machine gun in Khadera, killing just anyone that was passing. A treacherous terrorist attack. A few weeks later, a treacherous, terrible attack in Dizengoff in Tel Aviv on young people in a bar. Our intel was saying all these events are coming from the hornet's nest in Jenin. Ungoverned space, the PLO aren't even in there. Islamic Jihad. Now listen, I'm not calling them Palestinian. Everybody calls them PIJ. I don't know if you noticed in my tweets, I took out the P. Islamic Jihad. Why? Because when I'm talking to the outside world, it sounds more frightening and it shows the connection to Iran. Islamic Jihad, Islamic Jihad. So basically since March, after these two events, the IDF has been going into the camp and trying to cut the grass and handle the hornet's nest. Tom Bateman, who's usually a problematic reporter for Israel, he did a very interesting article on BBC, which he never usually does, and he really showed some very hard visuals from the camp. I recommend you all to go and look at Tom Bateman's BBC movie called Guns in Jenin or something. So basically, we were doing these operations since March. And about a week ago, we apprehended Mr. Bassem El-Saadi, who is the local Judea and Samaria Islamic Jihad kingpin. For Islamic Jihad Gaza, they saw that as an opportunity, and basically they ramped up their forces and started basically flexing very strongly on the border. Our intelligence was looking at their activity, and basically there was an imminent threat that we were seeing from Islamic Jihad, wanting to ramp up and threaten and shoot an anti-tank missile from the Gaza border into Israel to take out a bus or a train. And basically Israel, under a lot of criticism, closed off the Gaza vicinity. I remind you all, summer holidays. And basically that was our time to a bit put it to sleep and basically take the initiative to our side. They will not hold us hostage. We saw that because it's Islamic Jihad, we had the GCC backing, the Jordanians were pretty quiet. And basically, once we saw the right time and we saw 2 squads of anti-tank squads moving towards the border, we launched a preemptive attack, which we don't usually do. We usually respond only to fire. And we took out 2 squads, and we took out 2 Gaza Islamic Jihad leaders, Thaysir Jaabri and Abdallah Kadum. Abdallah Kadum is the anti-tank commander. Basically, from the IDF perspective, if they stood down after that or did something small, by the way, the instructions they got was because they needed a victory picture, just take out a few cameras and then close the event, it would have probably ended. No one had the interest to escalate. Hamas, the fuel situation, blah, blah, blah. All the situation of the crossings, by the way, because that 4 days where the jihadis were threatening, we closed the crossings. Why? Not as a punitive action against Gaza. Before that, everybody was coming in, the trucks were coming in and out. It was unsafe. We heard threats to shoot at a truck coming in to bring food or fuel. How cynical is that? So on our first strike, as I said before, and then it's the regular dance started, and that's more or less the story. What's the story I want to tell you about what we did here in the spokesman unit? And here we're all on the same page. And this is where we need you guys in the US. Once it started, I said, I don't want to know what's happening anymore in the Israeli press. There's a tendency to keep the drum beating here. Everybody in the international world was focused on Taiwan, and I was enjoying the quiet. It wasn't getting a lot of interest. And we called it here the sand clock for legitimacy. We said, okay, what's going to happen now is they're attacking us, we're attacking them. There's going to be a collateral damage event. And we decided to capture one topic, and we called it the misfired rockets. At 5 o'clock on the first day, Fox News put up this picture that we sent them, which was showing that 30% of the rockets were falling within the Gaza Strip. They're firing from within their areas, within their civilian areas, and it's falling on their civilians. That was the narrative that we were pushing aggressively. And again, I'd like you all to follow my Twitter and also follow our network. I hope you all are. But we were pushing it. I did a video message talking about it too. And then the first event happened at 10 o'clock. The first event happened at 10 o'clock. Palestinian rhetoric was saying, terrible massacre in Jabalia, potential for another AP event, terrible visuals of kids running into hospitals. And basically, I ran immediately to our ballistic missile center. Can you all see the picture, Jeremy?
Yes, we can see the picture. If you can just raise it a little bit higher. That's good. Thank you. So
what I did immediately was we ran to our ballistic missile defense center, and we showed the launches at 9 o'clock, the trajectories, and we showed one of the missiles landing inside Jabalia. And we basically also told them that the last time the IDF operated in that area was at 6:51. This data allowed me to tell and tweet, and I got confirmation that it was Palestinian fire. And the case here was important. Why? Because after I did that, I basically got New York Times, Washington Post, everybody lined up to show them the data. There was a viral movie also showing like the rocket, but I said I can't sign on it. It's not something the IDF did. And about 2 or 3 hours later, we showed another operational picture. I don't know if you saw it. Also CNN put it up. of a salvo and a mission and a missile landing inside Jabalia, which was the cameras that are surrounding the Gaza Strip. So basically, us focusing on that narrative and not beating the drums like the Israeli press, which was allowed us to close the event with all the problematic press, mainly the East Coast press and the British press. We got a fantastic already, build. Here. The build came out with a very good headline, also AP, saying that the Palestinian rockets are killing Palestinians. And then it just came off the news. A terrible tragedy. We were all very sorry, but that was our battle for narrative. In the second day, we were already hunting launchers. There was some collateral damage. In the meantime, it stayed quiet because they understand, right? We pushed that narrative, and more or less, that's the story I wanted to tell you. And I hope that basically right now, we're now explaining what we did. And when I look at our public diplomacy office, and I'm learning the business too, did that before that strategy. I'm expecting when we do these activities to ask you all to follow our networks and follow our narrative and push it as much as you can.
So let me just ask for some clarification. What you're sharing with us is that the operation was not planned originally, but was a result of the military activities in the West Bank against the Islamic Jihad. And once you found or felt that there was a threat coming from the Gaza Strip, this is when the operation began?
Correct, Jeremy.
Okay.
We've always tried to differentiate between Judea and Samaria and Gaza. Hamas, Shomer Chomot, in Guardian of the Walls, Hamas started firing into Jerusalem because of the Ramadan barricades in the Damascus Gate. So we weren't happy about that. But Hamas at the time were against the activity.
So, and the second point that you emphasized in your last several minutes was that the Islamic Jihad is operating, or was operating, within the civilian population and thus causing to their own people damage by launching rockets that fell on themselves. Could you share with the audience, please, what is the feeling towards the Islamic Jihad within the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and in the Gaza Strip? They get massive support, or are they viewed as an extreme terrorist organization? So
that's a great question, Jeremy. So the reason that we're getting backing, the Abraham Accords here are interesting. Because they're connected to the Iranians, nobody likes them. Not the PLO, not all the GCC Abraham Accord countries, and you're not hearing anything from the Saudis either. The Jordanians are doing the rhetoric that they do, but under the radar it's quiet. So there's no really heartwarm feelings towards that entity.
Does that mean, and we're getting questions from the audience, several questions, that Hamas really is controlling what goes on the day-to-day life inside of the Gaza Strip, did not or does not support the jihad? And is that the reason why they did not take a stand against Israel in this operation?
So I can't really, I don't know the Hamas mindset, but I can tell you this: in the end, when they're the sovereign, and they are, they were under a lot of pressure because of the situation with power in Gaza. I mean, Gaza was having quite a good summer. I mean, there was a lovely initiative that cleaned up the water in Gaza. There was a great bathing season. The crossings were opening, more and more people were coming in and out. Hamas basically had it more or less pretty okay. The fact that the Kerem Shalom crossing closed and the Qatari fuel wasn't coming in put a lot of pressure on them. It wasn't out of their strategic interest right now to escalate. Either was ours. I mean, we're all worried now about September with the situation up in with the gas rig up in the north. So, you know.
So they're getting support, you're saying, from Iran, and Iran is Shiite, whereby many of the other countries, including Egypt and those countries that we have relationships with, including the Abraham Accord countries, are Sunnites. Is that playing a major a part in the difference between Hamas and jihad? And then another question that's coming up from the audience: where does the jihad get its massive weapons? They've been shooting over hundreds and hundreds of rockets. So where do they get their weapons?
So you all know it's Iranian backing. We tried not to trumpet it too much. It was very subtle. Not the IDF weren't trumpeting it. It was coming from the political parties. We were focused mainly on defending and doing what we do. But it's all Iranian support. You all know it.
I understand. So in a way, do you feel, does the IDF feel, does the state of Israel feel that it has accomplished its mission? And when the ceasefire was began on Sunday night, just before midnight, that we feel that we've accomplished what we wanted to accomplish originally?
So you heard our prime minister. He said that he accomplished. We're now being told by General Kochavi not to do the self-licking ice cream cone and be very modest, because you know all the officers like me who were here in 2014, 2006 have seen these things fall apart. It's that easy. I mean, the Islamic Jihad in Gaza, they're vigilantes. I mean, it could fall apart tomorrow.
So back to the question again about what goes on in the street. The average Palestinian in the Gaza Strip or the West Bank, do they support the Islamic Jihad, or do they feel reluctant to their way of actions and to what they have done to their own people, you know, by even causing financial and economical constraints on them in the last week?
I can only make an assessment, and I'm here to speak about the IDF activity, to talk about, to go into the regular Joe's mindset. There's been a lot of things here on the social networks that most, just like in Israel too, and also in Judea and Samaria. I mean, I was a battalion commander for 2 years in Ramallah, in Tulkarem. I'm very friendly, by the way. I was an ND in the National Defense University with the Palestinian commander. People just want, 90% of the people are just regular Joes, just who want to live and make a living and go to the beach. It's summer holidays, you know. Even the officers here in our unit, I have already older kids, but 3 days later, people say, listen, you know, our kids are at home alone. I mean, life, you know.
I appreciate that. You know, many around the world and United States, and what comes on through the media, what we hear is civilians dying in these operations, Palestinians, whereby Israelis are not. I'd like you to share with us the Iron Dome's effectivity and what would have happened if we did not have the Iron Dome. What would it look like then?
So I also spoke last night to the Conference of Presidents, and that's why we're doing all these talks, the American support for Iron Dome. And again, I can't talk here about Orbat and how much we have in storage, but it's always a concern. The numbers, there was about 1,000, you know the numbers, the 1,100 rocket launches, 990 of them crossed into Israel, 200 landed. Our numbers were about 97, between 96 to 97, don't catch me exactly on it, % success of the Iron Dome. So again, and I'm always in the back of my, I'm an air defense guy. I just spoke today. I got a question today from Reuters about Ben Gurion Airport, because there were like things about the shooting to the vicinity of Jerusalem. The Iron Dome is crucial, and we're advancing the capability all the time. And I'm worried about the north. Gaza is
But when
merely
you say
another.
you're worried about the North, and Israel is um, um, in a situation where we have complexities with many of our neighbors, you know, both ways. I mean, Egypt has assisted together with Qatar to get to the ceasefire and in a way to end this operation. On the other hand, you know, we are confronting major issues with Hezbollah, with hundreds of thousands of modern rockets. Does this operation in any way affect the threat from Lebanon?
At this stage, no. But we always know when the IDF goes all out and has a very minimalistic, modest, and clean-cut operation like we had, everybody's looking at it, to include Hezbollah. So, you know, I hope this event is in a way a deterrent. We know it. Did Dr. Milch want to say a few words? Or, I mean, I remember you said that he was supposed to make a few comments.
He will join us in a second, Dr. David Milch in a second. And he might have some questions for you as well. One of the questions coming from the audience, did the IDF use this new laser anti-missile technology that's been developed? We read about this in the news, or is this still has not been yet deployed?
It's still under development. Just a curious. When I finished my school in the US, I don't know if you all remember, we tried to develop together with the American military a system called the Nautilus. It was just massive. Lasers are the future. The cost of the missiles are just extremely expensive. Back then, the laser surrounding effects were too big, and now we're pushing forward for us to have this laser being ready. It didn't participate in this last conflict.
I understand. You mentioned shooting rockets from inside of the Palestinian, you know, civilian areas, okay, which is exactly what terrorism does. Could you share with the audience, because I do know that that's happened, whereby Israeli pilots went out for mission targeting missile launchers, Islamic Jihad, but then were asked to return because there were civilians in the area?
Yeah, so again, I invite you all to, after Shani will send you, Jeremy, and if you can send it to the whole group, we put up for the first time color movies showing how we aborted missions when we saw uninvolved people. Again, there were some events where we went for rocket launchers, again, with aerial UAVs, and we already published that we have UAVs that have munitions, and there was a little stockpile near the rocket, and we had some collateral damage from attacking the launcher. That was the last day, but there was even when we went for the second kingpin, Khalid Mansour, it took us 3 hours because there were kids in the building. That movie is on the IDF network. Please share the movie with all your network, with all your friends. I'm asking you.
Could you also share with us your Twitter so the audience can log into your Twitter and follow it?
Sure. So what's going to happen now after this is our officers are going to send it to you, Jeremy. We have a link that shows all the IDF, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube.
Okay, David, would you like to ask the spokesman, Richard Hecht, any question before you give us your personal perception?
I've lost my voice, so I'd like to hear actually David's spiel.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Colonel Hecht, for your presentation and everything that you and your colleagues in the IDF and the Army, and the Air Force and the Navy do. Being here in Israel at this beautiful David International Hotel, right on the Mediterranean and the beautiful beaches. Came here a week ago for a family wedding and to visit with our companies here. And a few of the things that you've said really resonate with me. The main comment I want to make is I keep hearing from family, from friends, from colleagues that this time is different. And I'm going to tell you at least what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling in terms of this time is different. And it really struck home for me today It happens that I'm here with my partner, Nancy. First time for her in Israel. I've been here about 35, 40 times. And
Wow.
we've been doing tours of Tel Aviv. Yesterday, we were in Jerusalem and did a tour there. Today, we went to Yad Vashem. And both my parents were Holocaust survivors. So Yad Vashem is very meaningful. And the new Museum of History of the Holocaust at Yad Vashem, which is extraordinary. And I hope that the Friends of AIFL, the extraordinary, wonderful organization that we're here under their auspices, and thank you, Jeremy, for joining AIFL, and Jonathan and Giovanni and Ruby, who's sitting next to me. The narrative, and you talk about narrative, Richard, and I look forward to learning about the Glasgow Jewish community that you mentioned. The narrative that comes clear in the new museum is something that I would describe as, which led to the tragedy of the Holocaust, the normalization of dehumanization. That you see clearly how the rise of the Nazis and anti-Semitism was normalized and led inevitably to the tragedies we all know. Fortunately, we're not talking about anything close to the Holocaust. There are threats which could be existential, but I must say that most people in Israel, myself included, don't believe that that's the threat. So what is the threat? What is different? And what I feel here, Richard, and please comment on it, is that there's an attempt by the enemies of Israel to normalize fear, to normalize intimidation, to normalize the sense of disruption, that people can't go about their normal day-to-day lives, their business lives. And in fact, for a few days in the South, things were shut down. Children couldn't go to school. Trucks couldn't deliver goods in Sderot and in the general area. But this time, the Israeli military decision was not to wait and to see whether the missiles fly, but to be proactive, to be preventative, and to make clear that fear and intimidation and anything that goes along with that will no longer be accepted by the Israeli population, by the Jews in general. And I must say, it also carries over into areas outside of the military, in business and politics. And I give credit, despite the disagreements in our political environments, Yair Lapid reached out to Bibi and was in the war room. So in times of stress, we know that they reach across the political divides and they come together. But this is what I observed and what I heard from friends and family and colleagues, that no longer will the Jews in Israel or Jews worldwide who support Israel tolerate being intimidated in any way. And not to do that with a in-your-face, I dare you mentality, but to say that there's a normalcy which needs to prevail. And of course, the challenges of figuring out how to have a sustained normalcy, these remain. But at least for the week that I've experienced here, and I've been in Israel during the Second Intifada and multiple occasions when missiles flew from the north or from the south, but it feels different this time. It feels like a line has been drawn, and it's because of people like yourself, Colonel Hecht, I believe, and a mental attitude change, a different internal narrative that I'm sensing here, that this line is being drawn. And I do believe the Abraham Accords and many other things going on will ultimately lead to at least the possibility of being able to have a sustained approach and a solution to the issues that we're talking about. What do you think, sir?
David, I came to tell you the story, but it's the first time I've had goosebumps during a Zoom conference. It's very inspiring what you just said, really, from the bottom of my heart. Wow.
Thank you, David. I have a question to David. David, so you shared with us it's not the first time you've been in times of conflict in Israel, but Nancy, this was obviously her first time for being. How did she feel? Was she scared, terrified, understanding, calm?
Well, so Thursday night, we were at our family wedding at the Lawrence in Jaffa, beautiful, wonderful facility. And Friday, I'm sure many here will know Monterey Restaurant on the beach here in Tel Aviv, almost right across from the David Intercontinental, where I'm talking to you from now. And we were at dinner, and suddenly there was a boom. And Nancy said, "Oh, are there fireworks?" And I said, "Well, there are fireworks, but of a different kind. And we were just really hearing about, because we weren't listening to the international news programs, there were some reports, but it was taken in stride. Nancy is a technologist, had been at Oracle and IBM, currently works at Microsoft, very educated and talented individual. And seeing the companies that we work with in Caesarea and here in Tel Aviv, and yesterday, extraordinary company we work with in Jerusalem. And she just kept hearing and seeing for herself what's being accomplished here. And of course, there was no nervousness at Monterey Restaurant. There's been no nervousness yesterday or today in Jerusalem. Sure, you're aware of it, but there's a quiet confidence, a sense of purpose that pervades the population here in the hotel, on the beaches, the drivers that we had traveling in the morning to Jerusalem, or going to dinner tonight in Neve Tzedek. So no, if anything, she's startled by the accomplishment. There's building going on all over this country right now. And again, for the long-term sustained health and well-being, the mental health of the children and the citizens here in Israel and Jews worldwide and the rest of the world, there needs to be a sustained pushback on fear, uncertainty, doubt, FUD, the FUD factor, intimidation, and to find then the space to be able to find for common ground and for communication and reconciliation. I'm certainly convinced that the vast majority of the population, as was said, in Gaza, in the West Bank, wants to lead normal lives, wants to lead normal lives for themselves, for their children, for their families, and wants to communicate and connect with normal living people in Israel and beyond. And it's the radicals that want to intimidate and capitalize on this fear, and we can't allow it. And that's where we have to draw the line.
David, if I can make, because you asked me a question before, if I can tell one thing here to the group. And I came to this job really with such a sense of meaning. There's a word that's being, and just piggybacking off what you just said in very strong words, David. There's a word that we use, and again, all my family are also in the diaspora, and all my American friends, they always say, you're doing a terrible job in Hasbara. There's this word that's called Hasbara. They usually say it. The Israelis are doing a terrible job in Hasbara. I don't want to use profanity, but I hate that word. Why? And it just, again, it's based on what you just said, David. It's a sense of Hasbara means that we have to explain or justify. No, no. We're here to stay. We're not going to beat the drums and start justifying. We are secure and enough. Simply.
And I have a surprise for you, Richard. Nancy just came down from the room, and we can ask her. I don't have to speak on Nancy's behalf. Let me see if so here she is.
Hi, Nancy.
And,
Hello.
so we've just been talking about the experience here over the last week, and as Americans, and visiting Israel, what it's been like. And Jeremy and Colonel Hecht have been discussing this, and they asked me, what did Nancy feel, when she realized that there were missiles being fired? And so you can answer for yourself, dear.
Okay. Well, thank you for asking. At first, I was quite startled, and but then quickly the conversation at the table went to the Iron Curtain, the fact that has happened before, and I felt pretty safe. Actually, I felt confident in the military's ability to intercept with the Iron Curtain.
Iron Dome.
Iron Dome. Sorry, curtain.
That's the Cold War.
Yeah, sorry. Wrong. But I felt pretty safe and all right about it. Took a minute to get used to, but.
And how about the average, like the family that we've been with, the colleagues? How would you describe their attitude towards the circumstances?
I would say in general, people seemed pretty confident that it would be fine. I didn't hear any panic. It just seemed sort of like it's happened before, and everyone's well prepared and go on with their day, I would say.
I have to say that David and Nancy, your words really are inspiring. It really, I'm touched. I did not expect to be touched. I will say that I feel that the complexity of our situation in Israel is not clear until you come to Israel and see it. We are a democratical country. We
Yep.
have rights for all. And as I shared with you earlier, and Lieutenant Colonel Hecht knows because he was a commander in the search and rescue unit, this is the Army serves, and people serve there from all segments of society, Jews and Muslims and Christians and immigrants, boys and girls and religious and non-religious, right and left, up and down. And it's a very complex situation. I will say that around 30% of the population down south, they're traumatized. Yes, we are strong internally and we believe and we know we're here and we have a good reason to be here. And we try to do the job the best we can. But I have got numerous calls from friends that their children are very disturbed and the impact on their learning and high school and et cetera is there. So one is a facade outside, but internally, I think we do, as David mentioned himself, live in some sort of a constant fear.
I'd like to actually, if it's okay, and I have to move to my next meeting, but I wanted to actually call out to Yvonne, who just made a very strong comment. I know I'm very aware of what's going on with the BDS in the colleges. And again, I still stand behind the word Hasbara. I know that the American youngsters Jewish youngsters are dealing with some hardship with all the BDS activity, but it's important that in their mind that they don't, what I was meaning to say, they don't have to be justifying what we do.
Yeah, I saw that question come through too. I didn't see the full question, but I guess they were saying the interpretation was that we don't have to explain ourselves anymore. And the answer is, of course, that the point I believe that you're making, Colonel Hecht, is we don't have to be apologists for taking a hard position. We don't have to, we don't have to, as Jews, as Israelis, or any person of any background, need to apologize for living a full life. Absolutely. I have a 20-year-old son who's going to be at University of Pennsylvania. We know what's going on campus. Of course, we have to be proactive. We have to make sure that the points are made. We can't just back off and be quiet. But that's not the point, I believe, in the context of this conversation that you're making, Richard.
Yes, I just wanted to just, because I saw Yvonne really wrote it was words, but it was from the heart.
Properly so, understood.
I would like to really thank you all, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hecht, Dr. David Milch, and Nancy. I found this extremely important and interesting. I'm confident that the audience that listened to this found it interesting. We will share with the audience and those who joined us, our friends, both the Twitter and other links to Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hecht's social media. Thank you all for joining us. Please join us for our upcoming webinars. You can look into the AIFL internet site and find us there. Our next webinar is this coming Wednesday, August 17th, noontime Eastern Standard Time, where we will be listening to Gal Kalev, the author of Judaism 3.0. So once again to all, thank you very much, Canada.
And come to Israel. If you haven't been here for a few years,
we will help
will
you.
not
The
believe
will help
what's
you come
going
to
on.
Israel.
It's extraordinary, quite extraordinary what's been developing here. Please come and enjoy yourself.
Toda rabah, shalom, shalom.
Nice to meet you, Colonel Hecht. Jeremy, great to see you, and everybody at the AIFL. Shalom from Israel.
And thank you, Ruby. Thank you all.
Shalom.